Suarez. So we hope to give you all the insights pertinent to this Republic Act 6713 along with Republic Act 9485 and RA 11032. Before I may proceed further, if there are disruptions as to the audio, please let me know. You may just text me in the chat box if I am not audible or if there are problems as to my slides for me to correct or to adjust, whatever is necessary. And for whatever questions that you may have, as provided in earlier announcement, you may provide that during the open forum after my lecture. Thank you. So let me now proceed. So RA 6713 is not only our Bible for government workers. As I have seen in the list of participants, there are a number of employees, officials already connected with the government. But this would help also for those who are interested not to join the government service. And in fact, not only for these personalities, where this RA 6713 is very much important, but likewise to those who have already retired, just recently retired in the government service, because under RA 6713, there is still that requirement for you to submit to your previous agency. Otherwise, there may be some sanctions or administrative liabilities along non-compliance of that requirement. Under RA 6713, since this is a law passed in 1989, this may be an aftermath of the EDSA revolution in 1986, where government workers' morale and values are at stake, where the Congress enacted this law to promote the high standards of ethics in the public service. We've learned the history, where there is the strong competition between two parties, and if you transact in the government service during the time, receive from government workers. So the passage of the law entails to promote this high standard of ethics, and it emphasizes also, as I've heard earlier, as emphasized also by Sir Enting Suarez, that public office is a public trust. As to elucidate this aspect, we always be reminded that once you are already appointed in the government service, unlike other property rights, your house, your vehicles, or other money rights or investments, your public office is not your personal property. It is vested with public trust or imbued with public trust, that whenever the trust from the public is lost by way of mode of removal, you from office, either by the initiative of the head of the government of the agency, by the appointing authority, or by any complaint from the general public, your office is not your right to protect with as compared to your property rights. That is why we are always accountable to the people. And no matter what status of your position is, though lamang yung mga nasa permanent status, but that would not serve as an assurance that you could end up retiring with that guarantee of security of tenure. There are still limitations along the way, where if you could not maintain your status as a good public officer, you could also be removed from public office. Among these remedies, as maybe you would heard already, like dropping from the rolls, like disciplinary case filed against you, where that would result to removal from government office. And on top of this is maybe some may have not known yet, non-compliance with the provisions provided under Republic Act 6713, which would result likewise to removal from government office. So with this orientation or with this lecture, perhaps high-ranking officials were removed from their office for non-compliance of the provisions under RE 6713. And based on facts, no less than our then Chief Justice, the late Renato Corona, was removed from office because of non-compliance under RE 6713. Another important policy provided under RE 6713, we are required to discharge our duties with utmost responsibility, integrity, competence, and loyalty. So no further discussion on this. We are expected, as you join the government service, you are expected to be responsible. No? You are expected to have that high degree of integrity. In the performance of your duties and functions, you're expected to be competent and also efficient. And likewise, your loyalty, not only to the person, but to the government and to the general public, is at most very important. Another important policy, act with patriotism and justice, lead modest lives, and uphold public interest over and above personal interest. So we would be enlightening on these issues, on these policies provided in the enactment of this Republic Act 6713. If you note in the government service, maybe you could hear so many complaints, comments. That is why there are so many facilities, or mechanisms or feedback procedures where the government provided to clients and even government workers to air their grievances against the government. So if you are part of the bureaucracy, is this a cause for concern? Are you alarmed by these feedbacks? If you might not have received a complaint lodged against you from the hotline, will that be a cause for alarm if there are anonymous complaints or letters lodged into our offices against our non-feasance, malfeasance, or misfeasance in the performance of our duties and functions to the government? So at our end, if we happen to receive these kind of comments or complaints, that we treat that actually initially negative. We take that on the negative side. But to some other government employees or government agencies, they consider these comments and complaints as a way, as we considered it as a wake-up call, perhaps. But maybe from the eyes of the public, maybe there are some necessary things to improve or enhance or amend. That is why we in the government service look for some other mechanisms, how to improve government service delivery. We base our services based on the performance we deliver to the public. That is why if we compare our performance with that of the private sector as against the government, good if you are still in the private sector, but the demand for service is very high in the private sector. Because if you are not to render services, if you are not to perform your actual duties and functions, if you fail to meet your target, then that would result to the bankruptcy in the organization. So in the government service, there is this study, perhaps, that in the government, the way we are to motivate employees to do better, to perform better, is by way of incentives. But there are some counter-arguments to that effect because large companies worldwide, they do not engage into this practice, no? Like motivating employees by way of giving incentives. Recently, we received in the government the mid-year based on performance, so very minimal required performance, very at least satisfactory only, not very satisfactory performance. Performance is very essential in the way they deliver their basic services to the company. That whenever they have already attained their target for a given day or a given hour, they could do whatever they want in the organization. We, at the government service in the Philippines setting, we are confined to the 8 hours, workday scenarios, 40 hours a week. So there are some amendments or modification into this where during this pandemic, the Civil Service Commission is aligned also to the government's thrust to provide the work from home scenarios where government employees can work more productively at home. But going back to this issue, if a government employee failed to perform his or her assigned task or accomplishment or target, as if he or she would say that no service has no effect at all. Why? Because at the end of the day, all these government workers are still receiving their basic pay. No deductions as to the non-performance, non-attainment of targets. Is that a good example to follow in the government service, where everyone has to sit down from 8 o'clock to 12, then 1 to 5, or for those agencies at present where they're frontliners or not, we are already required to provide a noon break from 12 to 1. Would that satisfy your earnings for the day's work? You are receiving a complete of your salary. So maybe this is a call now for all of us. If we may hear comments or complaints, maybe because there may be no public service being performed, or maybe inefficient public service, or incompetent public service, that is why this Republic Act 6713 would be a great tool to guide all government workers in this bureaucracy. Under RA 6713, there are 8 norms of conduct. So we are going to the basics now for all of us. We are not to know all of these norms of conduct provided under RA 6713. For those who may not have known this, this is a good opportunity for all of us to know the 8 norms of conduct provided under RA 6713. And in fact, every year, the Civil Service Commission is providing incentives or recognition. If you might have heard our annual HAP, the Honor Awards program, where we recognize employees in the government who manifested all of these norms of conduct in their performance of their duties and responsibilities. We consider them yung award namin every year, the Dangal ng Bayan Award, where at present, last year, the current price is at 200,000, and the memorabilia, the award, the plaque, and on top of this award, the automatic promotion to the next higher position available in the government service. So that could be enticing for all of us to know all of these terms of conduct. Maybe in the future, we would be recognized by our heads of agency, by our immediate supervisor, or maybe by somebody in the public from the outside that would recommend us for this annual search by way we manifest all of these 8 norms of conduct. Maybe not all, but maybe you highlight your performance of your duties and functions based on these 8 norms of conduct. So what are these 8 norms? First, commitment to public interest. Second, professionalism, justness and sincerity, political neutrality, responsiveness to the public, nationalism and patriotism, commitment to democracy, and simple living. So, very simple, no, yung last. Going into details, number one, we have this commitment to public interest. So, ito yung common natin na problema, no, sa government service. What would we mean, no, by commitment to public interest? It only would show simply as that to uphold public interest over and above our personal interest. And whenever there is this conflict between your personal interest and this public interest, always uphold officers by way of a memoranda. And in fact, that is a sad news to hear, to realize sometimes that some government employees are prisoners, no? Prisoners, we call these prisoners of this memoranda because they may only obey orders if there are memoranda or memorandum issued to their performance, not to the performance to their task. But on top of this, with or without that kind of office order, if that would be performed during regular working hours, if there is that is what we call conflict of your personal interests, like you have some other personal things to attend to, then you go to that not to perform the order as provided by your immediate supervisor, then that would be a violation under this first norm, no, of conduct. As a government employee, we are expected to use our government resources efficiently, effectively, honestly, and economically. We are required to avoid wastage of public funds. Especially at present, we are now experiencing a record-breaking, no, debt. The government has already owed from the local and foreign sources, I don't know if you have heard the news, around 30 or 13 billion pesos, no? 30 billion, I think, pesos to this loan, no? To this debt. And we are quite alarmed by this because at the recent development, the way we address the problems of the government, we are still struggling, especially with this pandemic, especially with the fight against drugs, especially the fight against corruption in the government service. So what would we expect, hopefully, by the next administration? This would be a priority for this next administration. Also, with this commitment to public interest is for you to have the ability to look beyond selfish or personal interest, and having a sense of justice and a sense of outrage at its violation. That even if a very low-ranking employee, a demeaning, reference to them. In fact, we consider them at present as the direct reporters. That even at their level of their employment in the government service, if they could feel an outrage, if there are higher officials or if they observe their immediate supervisors doing otherwise as provided in this commitment to public interest, then that could be a cause for alarm. Because even a small thing, a small property, funds wasted, then that could already be a cause for alarm. So with this commitment to public interest, if you're already in the government service, we help the government to look some other resources by way of our contribution to help the wastage of these public funds. Second, we have this professionalism. If you have joined already in the government service for the number of years you have been in the government service, perhaps, maybe you have already manifested this norm of conduct, this professionalism, by performing our duties and functions with highest degree of excellence, professionalism, intelligence, and skill. And you are expected, once you enter into government service, your high degree of devotion and dedication to duty. That is why whenever you're faced in the panel, no, you're in the interview during the selection process, you may be asked by the members of the panel of the selection team, once you applied in the government service, maybe you will be asked, or you were asked, what is your great contribution once you enter into government service, or what is your greatest asset? Why you join the government, or why you join the government service? So mostly you may hear that your great devotion, dedication, your competence, your professionalism is your great asset. No? Or maybe your intelligence and skill. But on top of this, that could not be a good assurance, no, for one who could perform better or best in his or her duties and functions. There is still this commitment. There is still the commitment and dedication to professionalism. Discourages wrong perceptions of role as dispenser or peddler of undue patronage. Under this norm of conduct, there are at least 5 dimensions of professionalism. No? There's one, specialized knowledge, that may be under the skills, standards, spirit, and supportive environment. So what are these 5? Under this dimension of specialized knowledge, and we are aware all of this, that we perform our duties and functions based on our acquired knowledge, no? The learnings that we have gained from our formal education, or maybe from informal educations or informal training. It is not only the usual professions, no, it includes all employees as long as a specialist knowledge about the job is possessed. That is why at present, if you might observe in the government, and we receive requests for publication of vacant positions in the government service, we require the competency requirements, no, for that particular position. That would entail the level of specialized knowledge required for the given position, or for the second aspect or dimension of professionalism, the skills, no, the skills required for the performance, no, of that particular position once you join the government service. And as to the skills, there are positions that would require, no, a better appreciation of your techniques on how to do things, because these two, knowledge and skills, are 2 different things. No one may possess the correct knowledge, but one may not have the correct skills in the performance of a specific duties and function. Like, to put it into real practice, like a plumber may have a skill in the plumbing works, or the welder, but he or she may not have a good knowledge in how to decide things, no? Problem solving, in conducting research or conducting surveys. So these are 2 different things and involve different specialization in the aspect of government service. And in fact, the Civil Service Commission is providing eligibility, no, for skills-oriented positions after recognized whenever an employee has obtained before a skills test like the bookkeeper, plumber, or other skills provided by test, that could no longer be converted into an eligibility, no, under our present policy in the Civil Service Commission. So one could get obtain an eligibility only after a 1-year temporary status appointed to that position requiring a skills eligibility. Third aspect or area of professionalism, we have the standards, where it provides a measure or something established to serve as basis of comparison in measuring or judging capacity, quantity, quality, extent, and or value. Like the present performance evaluation system, no? The SPMS or the RPMS for DepEd, or the provision of the minimum qualification standards to every position in the government service. We are all guided by this to monitor or to provide the benchmark to grant incentives or benefits to every employee. And this qualification standards also is to provide the minimum qualification required to an applicant to enter into government service. The fourth aspect of professionalism, we have the spirit, or sometimes we call this the spirit de corps, shared by people who have something in common. Like for a group of accountants, for example, a group of lawyers, a group of teachers. So they have this commonality as to their insights, no, or their values. So this positive spirit contributes to a feeling of empowerment and importance, creating a healthy environment in the workplace. So there may be some association of HR, an association of all budget officers, an association of all civil engineers. So this would help at least an involvement in that particular organization. And the last of this dimension of professionalism is the supportive environment. Like the Civil Service Commission and the PRC is conducting a regular exam, the licensure examination to those interested to acquire a profession. The Civil Service also provided examination to enter into government service. Is a way on providing a great support in our bureaucracy to support who have the required skills, who have the required knowledge to that particular profession. Then after only passing this kind of examination, then they may be considered eligible to join the government in that particular area of profession which requires practice of their profession. Okay? So that's the second norm of conduct, professionalism. So if you have questions along this line, you may write that down first and type that in our chat box after this lecture. The third of this norm of conduct, we have justness and sincerity. So this may exist only in our minds, the way we are just and the way how we are sincere, in dealing with our co-employees in the government, in our agency, or our dealings with our clients, where it is required that there may be no discrimination against anyone, especially the poor and the underprivileged. We have to respect the rights of others. As when we do this, we have to respect them, and the moment their right begins, then we have to respect the rights of the other individual. At all times, to be just and sincere means to serve people without discrimination, with honesty, free from hypocrisy or deceit. So wala na siguro yung baka mababawasan na yung mga marites natin, sa government service. So oftentimes we would hear comments or feedbacks from our government employees, and we only hear that after listening to other individuals, or some other clients may hear their grievances outside, not in the proper forum. So doing this in the government service is not a healthy environment. So we have to maintain always this justness and sincerity in all our dealings, with co-employees and also to our clients. Number 4, we have this political neutrality. Though we have just concluded the national and local elections, and we appreciate and we do not hear, because as in the government service, or if you join the government service, you are expected to be politically neutral, to provide service to everyone, no matter what are their party affiliation or preference. And in the concept, it should promote impartiality and objectivity in the exercise of your duties and responsibilities, no matter what are your political biases or color that you may have, especially during election period. So though at this time, during the last recent election, the social media is flooded with so many comments, feedback or sharings. Though our only limitations, there is no prohibition for a government employee to air their preference to state their choices, to state their insights to a particular candidate, that could not be within the sphere of political partisan activity. But the moment you invite others to to vote for that kind of person or to not vote for that person, then you may be facing problems with this partisan political activity. So good, we do not receive complaints from our end with regards to this norm of conduct. Number 5, we have this responsiveness to the public, where all government employees is required to extend prompt, courteous, and adequate service. Provide information on policies and procedures in clear and understandable language. Responsiveness refers to your awareness and being sensitive of others people's needs. That is why during this compliance, with regards to Republic Act 11032, where before, if you are already approaching the end of the working hours, like 12 o'clock or 5 o'clock, if there are clients still outside, you may have that right or that privilege to say na, ma'am, balik na lang tayo bukas, malapit ng 5 o'clock. But with this principle and with the highlight, with this empowerment, provided under RA 11032 or the Ease of Doing Business and Efficient Government Service Delivery Act of 2018, all government employees are required to, if they happen to arrive at our offices before 5 o'clock, for example, or during lunch break, we are all expected to attend to this client. There's no more distinction as to whether your offices or your functions are considered frontline. That's no longer the qualification. We are all mandated to provide services and to have to respond to all the needs of our clients. That is why the principle of mamamayan muna, hindi mamayana. Number 6, norm of conduct, we have this nationalism and patriotism. And we are all reminded of our duty to uphold the locally produced products and to promote the use of this. Though our mentality sometimes we are more inclined to Western products, to encourage appreciation and pride of countries and the people. So it would be saddening to know that sometimes, as I was in the Department of Education before, as I happened to ask my students whether given the opportunity, to be reborn or to be born again, what would be your preference? What would be your preferred nationality? And sad to say, majority were not of the opinion that they want to be a Filipino. So how sad, And that is why whenever you go on the streets for some government agencies, like yung Bulwagan ng Katarungan, they conducted a flag raising along General Luna streets, and once they have flag raising, they sang the Philippine National Anthem, observing people, for some who are not mindful of this, some are still doing whatever they want despite the singing or the hearing of this pambansang awit. So that could be alarming for all of us. We fail to institute or integrate this into our system, into our culture, into our values, this sense of nationalism and patriotism. And for this, maybe you are familiar of this, some quotations provided or given by some of our prestigious personalities, like for the welfare of his native land. Would you recall who provided a favorite line in one of the poem of our national hero, Dr. Jose P. Rizal? Ito ang pangalawa, walang pag-ibig ang higit pa sa pag-ibig sa tinubuang lupa. Another famous quotation also from one of our national heroes. This was provided also by no less than our contemporary, Andres Bonifacio. Itong last, a sense of nationalism and patriotism also exhibited by his inauguration speech, no? No sacrifice can be too great for the country. Sino nagsabi nito? Okay. Maybe we will be reminded, no, by these lines provided by our then, the late President of the Philippine Republic, the late Ferdinand Marcos, no, Sr., where he delivered his inaugural address last December 30 of 1965. So how many years back, where he emphasized that in government we need sacrifice, we need to do more, we need to perform better, no? Because there's no other personality who could help our country, but it is through our efforts, concerted efforts, to do sacrifice, and that would be for the greater glory for our country. So that is a good sense of nationalism and patriotism. So we expect for the new administration, the son of our then President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., to do better as to his father's legacy, no? For the betterment also of our country, the Philippines. Number 7, norm of conduct, we have this commitment to democracy. So some may consider this as a crazy democracy. Why? Because some may abuse, no, the use of this freedom of expression, the freedom to use, like in the higher level of learning, the freedom of expression. Commitment to democracy is one way to commit to democratic way of life, no, and values. But the mere essence of how we exercise democracy is respect, no? The respect of one's life, the respect of one's values, and to avoid conflict. If that is provided under our law, then we have to respect the democratic system in our government. And of course, we are reminded of this principle in public accountability, the oath principle. And what do we mean by this? Where in the government service, we are all required to perform our duties and functions as a team, no? Not as an individual, official, or employee. We have to do our duties as a team, like as an office, as a division, or as a section, that whenever there are accountabilities in the process, one has to help one another. Hindi yung magtututuruan, no, kung sino yung may liability. Or maybe one has not to accept his or her failure in the performance of his or her task. And whenever this would happen, the oath principle is at most the most consideration, no, where everybody has to do everything to save the office or to save the organization. It is just like doing the volleyball game, no? The way we illustrate this principle of public accountability, where one in the team has to do everything to avoid the ball, no, from touching the ground, and to keep the ball from, or the game, no, from playing. So that's how we illustrate this principle of accountability using the oath principle. Under this commitment to democracy, we also are requested to manifest deeds, the supremacy of civilian authority over the military. We are all aware of this, as our president is a civilian authority. And of course, we have to put loyalty to country above loyalty to persons and other parties. Country, and we are free to do whatever we want under the present setup of our government. The last but not the least, we have the simple living. It provides to lead modest lives appropriate to positions and income of an employee in the government, not to indulge in extravagant or ostentatious display of wealth, in any form. So maybe you observe some who are fond of wearing, glaring. Sabi nga ng iba, para nang nagkahepa, maraming mga nakaburluloy sa kanyang katawan. But we in the government service has to avoid this because we serve as the models, for the public. We are not as models for any brand or for any product to that matter. And simple living is not just a value, it is an alternative lifestyle. Though we understand the present situation of our government employees, like the way we deal with our basic monthly income, the net income, and many are already alarmed by the increase in our contributions to the PhilHealth. So how could we survive with this principle, the simple living principle, where the ends could no longer meet our demands for survival in our living, some social living, in our family living. But with these norms of conduct, the 8 norms of conduct, we are all be reminded that still we are in the government service, and for those who wants to join the government, this should not serve as your discouragement, This should serve as your motivation. That I want to join the government because I want to manifest, to exercise this simple living. I want to exercise this commitment to democracy, this commitment to public interest. So we want to hear that. If we want to join the government because of these 8 norms of conduct. Okay? So moving forward, I prepared here, maybe for 5 minutes na siguro, a short exercise, just perhaps on your laptop. This short exercise, a 15-item test. Okay? So with the 228 participants, I would give you 5 minutes to maybe answer this on your own. And we will check later after 5 minutes to what would be the correct answer. The answer would be only the 8 norms of conduct. So if you have listened to our previous discussions, illustrations on how we would manifest the 8 norms of conduct, then maybe you could answer this, a 15 perfect score. Okay? There's no reaction from the chat box, no negative or violent reaction perhaps. So I'll give you 5 minutes to answer, and I would gather your responses later after the 5-minute break or time to answer. Okay, so time check is now 10:11, so I'll call you back at 10:16 to gather your answers. So just provide the correct norm of conduct to every illustration provided from these illustrations. Okay, thank you. So just provide your answers on a piece of paper. For those who are still with me to this virtual floor, virtual room. Thumbs up if you are getting my instruction. or any response in the chat box if you get instructions on what to do with this short exercise. Any response, if any? Okay, thank you from Sir Maynard. Thank you, Sir Franklin. So we are given now 4 minutes to finish answering this short exercise. So just provide your answers in any piece of paper and we will check that later. Whether you got all the 15 illustrations manifesting the different norms of conduct. Okay, let's check your answers. So just for purposes of illustrations, whether you are actually listening now to our discussion earlier. So for number 1, the use of office vehicle for official purposes only. Commitment to public interest. Okay, if you got it right, thank you. Second, endeavor to continuously enhance knowledge and skills. Professionalism. Good. Third, buy things which your salary can afford. That pertains to simple living. Number 4, abhor favoritism in making decisions. We refer to justness and sincerity. Number 5, provide services regardless of social status of client. So what's your answer on this? Responsiveness to the public. Okay, number 6, all other things equal, patronize locally produced products over imported goods. We are referring to nationalism and patriotism. Number 7, expose corrupt and corrupt practices. Somebody answered number 7. Patriot, wala pa answer sa number 7. Sila binigay na answer. What norm of conduct is this? This refers to commitment to public interest. Number 8, advocate a recruitment system that is purely based on merit and fitness. Professionalism, no, is the norm of conduct. Number 9, avoid being the subject of a lifestyle that is simple living. Number 10, limit the use of office telephone for personal calls. Sagot niyo sa number 10. So fast daw. So fast. Sorry ha. Mabitis daw. Sorry. So, this is number 2. Professionalism is correct. Number 12, we have this not engaging in vicious habits as to affect job performance. What's your answer on this? Number 12, somebody says professionalism. Professionalism. So the correct answer is justness and sincerity. Okay. So that's number 3. Number 13, making office systems and procedures simpler and easier. What's your answer on this? Number 13 is 5. 13.5, responsiveness to the public. Number 8, simple living daw. Ang answer sa number 13. So what's our answer on this? That is number 5, responsiveness to the public. Oh my God, did you look up, Pastor? Sorry. Loading ang laptop. My apologies, no? Next. Thank you for the correct answers. Responsiveness to the public. Number 14, maximizing office supplies. What's your answer on this? Somebody says commitment to public interest. Commitment to public interest. Yes, thank you for listening. Public interest, commitment to public interest. So number 1, that's number 14. That is says correct. Commitment to public interest. And the last but not the least, number 15, applying new learnings from seminars and training. So this would apply to this, no? To all of us. After we are done with all this lecture for the day, so that the correct answer to this, number 2. No, thank you for all the correct answers. Number 2, professionalism. So who got the correct answers? All the correct answers. 15 correct answers. May I know from the chat box? Sino nakakuha ng 15? 14? 14 correct? Wow, 11 over 15 si Sir Maynard. 14 over 15 si May Rydell. Very good. 13 over 15 si Pambanista at si Meldy. Wow, very good. Very amazing participants. No? Thank you. Thank you for all your responses. At least we appreciate that you are indeed listening, but not only listening, you internalize, no? Who got the highest score daw, we will give a cash reward. Oy, sino nag-aas nun? Ang taga-DMC. Walang 14, last call, may 10, may 8, may 9. So, just, may naka-14 daw, si Sir Maynard, naka-14. So, just send your, si Ma'am, Sir Idris Abilasan, got a 14 score. So, noted na yan ni Attorney Trilia, maka-receive na ng award. So maybe in the near future, if you are already in the government service, we highlighted this. Maybe you could be a nominee, no, to our annual search for the awards program. So thank you so much for your active participation. I appreciate all your answers, and I'm glad that you are actually having this internalization also on what we refer to these different illustrations. Thank you very much. So to move on, after these norms of conduct, if I may, we have these duties and responsibilities of government officials and employees, no, as provided also under the Public Access to 713. So before, we were required to reply to letters and requests within 15 working days from receipt, no, of that document. But with the passage of RA 11032, we are now required to attend or to reply to written requests or demand from our clients. If we may refer to simple transactions, that would only be 3 working days. No? Simple transaction refers to applications or requests which only require ministerial actions, or that which present only in consequential issues for resolution. What are some of these, no, for a given agency, like mga certifications, like yung mga requests for clearance, like yung payment of mga taxes. So these are some of the simple transactions, application, receipt, like birth registration, no, yung mga simple transactions that may be done within a given hour. So, or maybe the maximum requirement is 3 working days. For complex transactions, the government employee or the agency is given 7 working days. Complex transaction refers to requests or applications which necessitate evaluation and the resolution of complete necessary things to be done before that request could be acted upon if there are data needed to answer effectively on that request or to answer efficiently on that demand of comment. So you need some research, then that would entail the government employee to answer that request within 7 working days. The 20 days, refers to highly technical application. This refers to applications or requests which require use of technical knowledge, specialized skills, and or training in the processing and or evaluation. We consider this to some requests like conduct of yung feasibility study or conduct of some impact assessment on a certain program, or the conduct of action research in a given agency, was the impact on that procedure, or maybe some of this re-engineering of our basic services in our government frontliners. So the impact on this, the effect, if there are requests, for example, like received by the officer or employee in that agency, stamp received on that day, so that you may count, if that would be a 3 working days, 7 working days, or a 20 working days before you file your comments or complaints before the hotline, for example, or before the appropriate government agency. So this is also very important to know. The 3, 7, 20. Okay. Si Sir Abilasan daw ang nakakuha ng 14. So noted yun ni Attorney Estrella for the proper awarding later. Thank you for that initiative, Attorney. Moving on, other duties of public officials and employees under RA 6713. We have submit annual performance report, 45 working days from end of the year. So this performance report, we refer this to our annual performance evaluation under RPMS or SPMS. Or for some agencies, they are required to submit performance or annual performance reports to their immediate, or yung mga governing other agencies, supervising agencies. Third requirement, process documents and papers expeditiously, where every document must bear not more than 3 signatories. These are now highlighted with our RA 11032, or the ease of doing business, where in every transaction that requires the signature of a government official or employees, the signatory should not exceed 3. Otherwise, the agency must do some re-engineering or to streamline the process to reduce the number of signatories. Otherwise, you may be liable under 11032. Number 4, to act immediately on public's personal transactions, act promptly and expeditiously at all times, and must attend to anyone. So we already illustrated this as part of the norm, responsiveness to the public. Number 5 requirement, to make documents accessible to the public. These documents that may be available by viewing or available by request from the general public within reasonable working hours refers to only documents filed like the personal data sheet that may be filed by a government employee once they have submitted their appointment, or the DTR, for example, if you have submitted that one to the cashier or to the accounting. So what are the documents only, public documents available or accessible by viewing or by access to the public are those filed within RA 6713. And some of these, if you might have submitted already your SALN last April 30, the Statement of Assets, Liabilities, and Net Worth, these documents are accessible to the general public. So if you have filed one, then if somebody has to request, that is why at the back of the SALN, under the page 2, there is that declaration. If the ombudsman would look into your assets, or if somebody would request your SALN, you provided already the waiver at the back of that SALN. That is provided under RA 6713, where these documents filed under RA 6713 may be made available if the public would request this document. That is why, if you might heard in the news, like our mga highly elected officials, the president, the vice president, members of the judiciary, where some of the mass media require their SALN, they are required or they are obliged to provide. And the only limitation as provided under RA 6713, that whenever one has to request the SALN, he or she has to provide the purpose. And he or she or that organization should not use that SALN to other hidden agenda, like the filing of complaint, for examples, or other hidden objective. So before you request a SALN in that particular agency, you have to provide the legitimate purpose why you need to access or to require a copy of the SALN of any government official or employee. For the general government employees, our SALN are provided or deposited in every resident ombudsman for Mindanao. It is in the resident ombudsman for Mindanao. We are not the repository. The Civil Service Commission is not the repository of your SALN. So if one would request them, maybe you may ask if other documents kept in the agency with the records officer, would we still provide them to the general public? That would depend on the internal policy of the agency, where accessibility of public documents may or may not be available to the general public, depending on circumstances. Under RA 6713, there are also prohibitions. This may entail administrative or criminal liabilities or sanctions under RA 6713. And one of these is to have direct or indirect financial or material interest in any transaction requiring the approval of your office. So how to illustrate this? Like if you happen to be in the business permit or licensing division in the local government unit, and if one who may apply for the renewal or for a new business permit, for that matter, you may demand whatever, in whatever mode, whether direct demand or indirect demand, for whatever financial or material interest for the approval or favorable consideration of that request, where your office has to approve that kind of request, then that could be a great violation under this Section 1A Rule 10 of Republic Act 6713. Or maybe some other positions in the government where you are under the discretion to grant the approval of any request from the general public, like yung mga survey requests, mga permit or licenses, then yung sabi ng iba, dili mo agi ang bullpen kung walay padanlog. So that's one way to curb corruptions in the government service. As I may have before, experienced this. So very rampant. Yung one agency where I transported my motor vehicle before, as I happened to travel in a long distance, no? Marriage relationship for my wife in Iligan City. I have to travel through Ipolog to Iligan. I have to ride through a boat. So you are required to present clearance for them. So that's already the prohibition under this 6713. Another prohibition provided also under 6713, own, control, manage, or accept employment as officer, employee, consultant, counsel, broker, agent, or nominee in any private enterprise regulated, supervised, or licensed by your office unless expressly allowed by law. Like if you are the tax examiner, no, in the BIR, and to have an access, or if the private enterprise would have at least, no, a favorable consideration to whatever the request, or maybe they could secure some discount, yung tinatawag natin na tax avoidance. Hindi naman siguro yun illegal, no? Some would say, unlike with tax evasion, with that control or membership in that private enterprise as employee or officer, but under RA 6713, these are prohibited. You may not exercise these functions because this would result to conflict of interest. So how would you perform very well, no, without partiality as to your functions to review or to regulate, to supervise that kind of office or that enterprise if you are part of their organization? So we have to avoid this under RA 6713. Number 3, recommend any person to any position in a private enterprise which has a regular or pending official transaction with their office. So mas grabe na, no? Not only to request any monetary or financial interest, but before you may act on a certain request, no, for approval that is pending in your office, you may ask that private enterprise to allow somebody, no, to be appointed in that private enterprise before you could act on their request or transaction. So this still fall under Corrupt Practices Act, no, under RA 6713, and which is a violation provided under Republic Act 6713. And all these prohibitions, no, this 1, 2, 3, should still be binding before any government official or employee, even after their resignation, retirement, or separation from public office. Resignation or separation from public service, you cannot be appointed to those agencies or private enterprise where you may have exercised supervision, or you may have provided inputs, or you may have provided transactions, approval transactions to that office within a period of 1 year. So that is why in our case, no, like if we happen to retire in the future or resign or have been separated in the government service, we could not be appointed to any government agencies, no, that we supervise during our government engagement. So like we supervise all local government units, we supervise all state universities and colleges by way of their personnel actions. So we could not be appointed to these agencies by way of appointment or in any capacity, like by way of consultant or contract of service. That is prohibited for a period of 1 year. So that is very clear under RA 6713. Another prohibition, engage in the private practice of profession unless authorized by the Constitution or law, provided that such practice will not conflict or tend to conflict with their official duties and functions. So how would we illustrate this? Before you could privately practice your profession, like if you're a teacher, a lawyer, or an engineer, a surveyor, so you can do this, no, if you're in the government, but be sure to secure the approval from your head of agency with limitations that you could not use government funds, you could not use government resources, you could not use your official time engaging your private practice of profession. So if you might happen to have your private engagement, so necessitate for you to file your leave of absence, no? If you want to engage into private practice of profession. Provided further that such practice will not conflict or would tend to conflict your official duties and functions. So that is why we require this practice of professions generally after working hours, after 5:30 at most, or during Saturdays and Sundays. But the general limitation, it would not for the local chief executives, the governors, the mayors, if they are professionals, they cannot practice their professions while their performance of their duties as local chief. Outside of working hours, they may engage into their private practice of professions. So you may hear doctors, lawyers appearing in courts or in the presence of their clinics, provided they are not during their session days, no, or session hours. Normally, Wednesdays or every Fridays or Mondays, outside of these regular sessions, they may practice their profession. But also, there are some other limitations to this, no? Like doctors of medicines or practitioners in the medical profession may practice even during official hours, but only on emergency cases, no? So even during session, so the life of every individual is of utmost consideration. So they can still practice their medical profession even during session hours. So must priority you to save, no, the life of individual. Another limitation provided under the local government code for lawyers, Sangguniang Bayan members elected to this effect, especially that we have new set of elected Sangguniang members in the cities, municipalities, and in the province. They may appear as counsel before any court where the government is the adverse party. They cannot appear as counsels before any court, any administrative or quasi-judicial court for that matter, where the government is the adverse party. So conflict of interest is the primordial consideration. They cannot appear as counsel in any criminal case involving a government official or employee as the accused of an offense committed in relation to his or her office. Why is it so? No, they cannot appear because in any criminal case, the government is, or the employee, no, the employee is mere a witness, no, to that. The main complainant, if there is a criminal complaint, it is still the public. So the public which appoint or elected the Sangguniang member, the Sangguniang member should represent, no, as we illustrated earlier, this public office is a public trust. So you have to serve the client, the general public, not to any government official or employee. So he or she cannot serve as counsel or provide as a counsel to any government official where he or she is facing a criminal case before any regular court. He or she cannot collect any fee. So if you might heard government lawyers, no, regulation under this Republic Act. They cannot use property and personnel of the government except in defending the interest of the government. Okay? So for those who are already in the legal professions, marami-rami silang nag-join last May 2. So hope to observe, no, these limitations under Republic Act 6713. Moving on, another prohibition under RS 713, use or divulge confidential or classified information officially known to them by reason of their office and shall not make them available to the public. So by way of intelligence or confidential information or classified information, if you are given that opportunity, no, to receive that kind of information, you are not obliged to divulge that kind of information if it would threaten, no, the security, the peace and order of a given community. So that could be a violation. So walang mga marites dito, no, kung vital na yung public interest or security na yung nakasalalay. Number 6, directly or indirectly. Ito yung mahirap ngayon, no? Whether directly or indirectly solicit or accept any gift, gratuity, favor, entertainment, loan, or anything of monetary value from any person in the course of their official duties. So, saan napapasok yung ating mga solicitation? May mga magsusolicit tayo, like yung may mga activities, yung may mga anniversaries, mga araw-araw, or any activity in our government institution, it is strictly prohibited to solicit, no? To receive any gift to whatever amount, anything of monetary value from any person in the course of our official duties and functions, directly or indirectly. It may not be in the course of our official duties and functions, but if it would be directed towards that function or towards that activity or transaction that are pending in your office by way of giving these things, then that could already be a violation. Some of the exclusions provided under RA 6713, unsolicited gift. So, hindi mo hinihingi, you're not asking for this. Nominal or insignificant value, somebody would say 10% daw sa salary ng nagbibigay. So, if you're receiving, for example, 25,000, the minimum sa teacher, sa DepEd, a month. So, 10% of that is 2,500, no? So, kung magbibigay ka ng regalo, like yung plant, yung mamahalin na tanim, no? Yung mga hili ka sila sa mga plantitas, worth 2,500 to a given employee or a higher supervisor, for example, unsolicited gift is excluded. Pero lumampas ng 2,500, naging 2,501 na, then that could be another issue. But that 10% is not the hard and fast rule, no? As I would say, no matter how we define nominal or insignificant value, the moment you give something in exchange or in anticipation of a favor from a government official or from that kind at the office, then that is still prohibited. Indirect solicitation, paghihapon na siya. Excluded gift from a family member on occasion of family celebration, of course. Nominal donations from persons with no transactions with the office. So, walang mga string attached yung pagbibigay ng donations, like yung foreign donations or even local donations from yung mga service-oriented groups. These are not, they have no transactions pending in our office, then they are excluded. So, we encourage naman, no? Like sa DepEd, there are some donations during brigada, especially for the incoming school opening. They require donations from stakeholders. So if these are donations, they are not solicited, then we may accept that as part of the exclusions. Fourth exclusion, donations from private organizations considered not accepted as humanitarian, no, or altruistic in purpose, and government-to-government donations are excluded from this prohibition. Okay, so if you have questions along this line, you may clarify them in our open forum portion. Times check, it's now 10:49. So hopefully we could end this before 11:15 so that we could provide further answers to your queries or concerns. Or what are provided under Section 5. Our compliance to the 15-day period to act on requests, but we have already illustrated earlier that this was already amended by RE 11032. So we have to follow the 3, 7, and 20 working days period to act on letters or requests. Mind you, baka sabihin or baka sabihin nyo na wala kayo nakasuhan, there are already pending cases, no? Maybe our resource speaker from ARTA would give in the afternoon some illustration or cases already decided, no, by the ARTA or by quasi-judicial bodies in violation of Republic Act 11032. Mere non-compliance of the period or non-responsive body to a certain request or no attention to client's request could be already a violation. Number 8, receive additional, double, or indirect compensation. So you may ask to some extent, no, like common queries for a government official who is a barangay elected official or appointed in the local government unit as a utility. Can he or she accept other employment as job order, for example? Since there is no double government hiring, because we classify job order as no employer-employee relationship or no government employment. But as provided in RA 6713, it may fall under indirect, no, compensation received from the government. That could not be a government engagement, but still the government funds are used to pay, no, your salaries. And that is still prohibited under this provision of Republic Act 6713. Though honoraria received or other allowances received are allowed for the performance of certain tasks, expertise of a government official or employee. So walang provision naman po doon. Only those compensation as a nature of compensation or salary to services rendered to any government entity. Additional to this, accept any present emoluments, office, or title from any foreign government without the consent of Congress. So double compensation pa rin, but this may not apply to us outside of our country. Conflict of interest. How do we define conflict of interest? So we define conflict when the official or employee is a member of this. Kung may share ka sa certain stocks in a private entity as member of the board, an officer of that corporation, or as an owner, no, or has substantial interest. When we say substantial, it is not enough. You may have 50%, but if you have at least 10% maybe, that could be already substantial in a certain business occupation. A partner in a certain partnership, you may have conflict of interest if you are in the government service, where the interests of such corporation or business or the officials right therein are opposed to or affected by the faithful performance of your official duties. How could we illustrate this, no? This conflict? A simple illustration would be like if you are a member of the BAC, the Bids and Awards Committee, or if you are the TWG or the BAC Secretariat, for example. So you perform your duties and functions in the procurement, in the procurement of the supplies of your agency. In like manner, while doing these official functions, outside of your official functions, you are the stockholder, or maybe you are the board of directors of an educational supply, no? Or maybe a hardware, or maybe a partner of a certain partnership in providing aggregates, gravel or sand. And if ever you procure such material from that private enterprise where you are an official or an employee in whatever capacity in that private enterprise, then that would redound to conflict of interest. Klaro po yan. Like if there are yung catering services, so you provided bids or you provided quotations to these corporations where you're a member of that corporation, di pa daog nato, then that would fall under this conflict of interest. And the rules provide prohibited primarily to engage into other financial activity. Like some would engage into like yung sa mga Avon dealership or some loading services or some other business enterprise, provided the performance of your duties and functions in the government agency will not tend in a way directly or indirectly in conflict, to your performance of your function. So yun lang ang pinaka-essence, no? Another example would be if you are appointed a pharmacist, if you are in the hospital, for example, but your position is a pharmacist, outside, you own a pharmacy. So even without the procurement from your private enterprise, no, that you have a substantial interest in that pharmacy, still there is this conflict of interest. There may be some influence in the process of procurement, no? There may be some influence in the process of procurement, which, as provided in the rules, since if there is already a manifestation of conflict of interest, we have to avoid that at the start of that engagement. Okay? We have this divestment, no? The transfer of title or disposal of interest in property by voluntary, completely, and actually depriving or disposing oneself of right thereto in favor of another. One way to avoid conflict of interest is by divestment, no? By voluntary or complete due, no? Ang disposition of one's ownership into that private enterprise. And whenever conflict of interest arises, the official or employee has to resign. So there's no hard and fast rule, no? When conflict of interest arises, it would depend on every circumstance. So whenever you feel that your performance of your function in the private enterprise would tend to conflict directly or indirectly your performance of your function, better resign from that position within 30 days from assumption to office or within 60 days from assumption whenever you have divested your shareholdings. So you have to resign or to divest all of those shareholdings to any member of degree of consanguinity or affinity. No? Anong ibig sabihin nito? So if ever you divest your shares of stocks in a private enterprise, you have to divest that to anybody outside of this fourth civil degree consanguinity or affinity. So based on our degree determination, that fourth degree is the first degree cousin. No? So outside of that, relationship is allowed. So if within, so anak, mother, in-laws are prohibited under this conflict of interest. Violations under these rules, any violation under RS 713 shall be punished with a fine not exceeding the equivalent of 6 months. So mabigat-bigat din, no? 6 months. Maybe in 1989, that 6-month salary as we received during that year, around mga 1,000 a month ng salary. So, matagal-tagal na rin pala ako serbisyo, no? 1989, but I joined the government in 1993 where my salary was only 1,500, no? Per quincena, so meaning 3,000 a month. So that could be great already, big already during that time. But if violations of Section 7, 8, and 9, what are these Section 7, 8, and 9? Ang Section 7, as we discussed earlier, are the different prohibitions, no? Yung mga double compensation, yung receiving of solicitations, yung mga other emoluments received in your private capacity or material or financial interest in the performance of your functions. Those are falling under Section 7 of RA 6713. What are violations under Section 8? Maybe we have not provided that in the screen or special ni siya, no? Surprise. These are limitations or prohibitions provided for the disclosure, no? Statements and disclosure. Where you are required, we are all required to submit the statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth. For those already in the government service, annually we are required to submit that before April 30. If you have joined the government, you have to file your SALN within 30 days, no? As provided this already. Upon retirement, separation in the government, or resignation, you are still required to submit your SALN within 30 days from separation or after separation from the government service. That is expressly provided under Section 8 of Republic Act 6713. So what are the violations? Also provided under Section 9. These are the divestment, no? as we discussed recently, yung divestment ng shares of stocks to avoid conflict of interest. That is why it is also provided in your SAL and at the back. Those yung mga relationships, no? To what you are related or your business interest, to what participation you have in that business interest. So clearly provided in that SAL-N, no? The second page of your SAL-N. So be mindful of that because all declarations provided in that business interest and relatives in the government are made subscribed, no, or are made under oath once you submit your statement of assets and liabilities. So what are the penalties for violations under Section 7, 8, and 9? So imprisonment, 5 years, fine exceeding 5,000, or both. And ito yung worst, no? Disqualification to hold public office. So that is why failure to submit the SAL-N, that would disqualify you or remove you from office. That is the scenario, no, with the late Chief Justice Renato Corona. Failure to submit the SAL-N disqualify somebody to hold public office. And non-submission or incomplete submission or under declaration SAL-N, because there are also cases decided by the Ombudsman where government officials and employees, I have heard some in Labason, no, Sindangan area, and I believe we have participants also from Calamba, Misamis Occidental. There were already decided cases where the Ombudsman suspends government employees for failure to submit their SAL-N or misdeclared their SAL-N or underdeclared, no, their declaration and their statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth. So be careful on these violations, and of course, these last public officials and employees, and shall be tried jointly with them. So it's not a good excuse if you as a private individual, no, if you have not yet joined the government service and you intimidate somebody to commit these acts provided under RA 6713. Maybe you entice somebody to proceed like the one in some agencies you may act as fixer. So whatever liability of that government employee, you may receive the same liability also, penal liability. And you may ask, how about, sir, yung disqualification to hold public office since he or she is still in the government, in the private sector? That disqualification is a perpetual, not disqualification. So if he or she is still in the private, as private individual, as a result of that penalty, he or she cannot join the government for life, no? So how sad naman. So be sure to observe all of this, 8 norms of conduct. You may review on this, the prohibited acts, the regular filing of our SAL-N, the divestment procedures, and all of these penalties are our guide, no? Or as our reminder once you are already in the government service or even you have not yet joined the government service, because penalties are still provided for those who jointly, no, act in conspiracy with government officials. Okay, times check is now 11:05. We have still 10 minutes. But before I may end my sharing, let me provide you with this last slide. As we heard earlier, no, it's not easy, no, as I would say, to join the government. Or some would say that, how could you be rich, no? How could you be rich if you join the government? As the moment, no, I joined the legal profession in 2003. So I have these options, no? What or where to join in the government service or in the private practice. So I was enticed to join with the BIR. For what? And he retired in the Bureau of Internal Revenue with good reputations. and to think we do not own even a piece of land, no? To be honest to that. So meaning, there's no whatever you are thinking at the moment that BIR is known for some to that kind of government entity. But I opted to join with the Civil Service Commission. For one reason is maybe for some sacrifice to what we consider commitment, no, to serve in a better aspect of government service, as I considered my profession before in the teaching field as a basic, no, or because a noble duty. And once I've joined the Civil Service Commission, so I realized as this personality has also provided, no, before that slide, there is this administrative system amendments provided already under RA 6713. Conduct continuing studies, analysis of work systems and procedures, develop a service guide. For some agencies, they have already provided a citizen charter. You may refer, like if you transact with GSIS, the PhilHealth, may nakalagay dyan sa front, yung tarpaulin, yung frontline services nila on how to avail of their basic services, provided in yung workflow chart. And for some comments and requests, provided na po na siya, no? And the designation of a resident ombudsman in every government agency to attend to local requests or comments, no, within the government agency. So ito yung mga initiatives already implemented in the bureaucracy. As of the moment, yung RA 11032 is a good law which addresses already some of these administrative revisions or initiatives in the government service. So the last of this slide, ito yung I'd like to share with you as one of my mentor before with the Deputy Secretary. Once she said, people are attracted to join the government because of the perceived power of bureaucrats. But public service is not about power and getting rich, of course. Now, it is all about suffering. So financially, physically, psychologically, of introducing reforms, the joy of touching people, and the joy of teaching them new ways of thinking and observing our people. So with this hope, we encourage some who are not yet in the government service to join us. And for those who are already in the government service, these lines of this Deputy Secretary would serve as our guidance, no? As our motivation to do more and to do better in the government service. And with that, I thank you all for your listening. Hindi nabawasan yung 224, doon ako bawasan ng konti from 230 kanina. So I thank you for all your patience, indulgence in listening to this lecture regarding Republic Act 6713. So thank you, and if you have questions, we attend to them through the chat box and through our moderator. So thank you and good morning and happy fiesta to all of us. So, sino yung moderator, if I may? So, sino yung moderator, if I may? Nawala sa Melanie, okay? Any questions from our chat box or si Ma'am moderator, if you may preside? You're welcome for all the appreciations provided in the chat box. Yes, we could provide you with a soft copy of the PowerPoint. I-email ko lang kay Attorney, no? Kay Attorney Estrella, the copy of my presentation for your reference also. So, no worry on that request. Okay, makahingi. Thank you. Okay, so yun ang siguro pinaka-major request. Unless you have questions. Yes, Ma'am Melanie or si Ma'am?
Hello, Attorney.
Yes, po.
Good morning, maayong fiesta sa tanan. Thank you for that very informative presentation, Attorney, especially for the conduct of us in officials and employees here in the government. So actually, I am Mandel Zoe Dugasan. I am Melanie's partner.
Yes, sir. Mandel. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, you may.
Already.
Thank you, ma'am.
For those who have questions, raise your hand so that you can be acknowledged, or pwede mo mag-write di ani ay mag-send di ani sa ato ang chat box if you have questions, kay para we can address it to Attorney Mayorita so that dili kay ta everyday makatambo ni Attorney Mayorita. Di ba, Attorney?
Pwede po, ma'am, everyday. Kaya naman tayo mga open line na po, ma'am, open line. Basta during working hours lang, you could always refer your concerns to our office. Anytime.
Here, Attorney, nakabutang dari Attorney. Sir, by Ma'am Maria Lourdes, ang nakabutang dari, sir, you said earlier that we no longer use the terms rank and file and subordinate. So what term is appropriate now?
Yes. As I've said earlier, ma'am, no, so parang dinini kasi yung word na subordinate. Parang yun kasi helper lang, ang dating helper lang ka. But in the proper context, if we are aware of these mga HR languages, we refer our subordinates now as direct reports. No? So as direct report, they are now properly addressed as that. So wala na yung subordinate actually. So thank you for the question, Ma'am Maria Lourdes.
Here, thank you, Ma'am Maria, and thank you, Attorney Mayorita. We also have one question. So actually, Mr. Richard Redulia is raising his hand. So I'm asking you, sir, to unmute yourself.
Thank you po, ma'am. Attorney, good morning po. Salamat.
Yes, po, sir.
Regarding po sa last presentation niyo po, kay Secretary Briones.
Briones po. Ano po yung po?
Just a little bit lang din po, observations based on those online results din po. Observations based on those online results given by her. Kasi it seems like sa existing yung nangyari po talaga sa ating sa government po recently. So parang opposite talaga yung nangyari, Sir Attorney. Diba yung sinasabi niya tungkol po sa lust for power, as I would really coin it or use it, no? Sorry for the harsh term po. But then, that's it po. Yun talaga yung nakita na parang hindi totoo yung nasabi niyo po sa yung state niya po.
I understand po, sir.
Salamat sa
salamat po sa honest answer, no, observation to that. Maybe yun kasi yung nafe-feel din natin, sir, no, because as we join the government, yun kasi ang dating, you have the authority, no, the power to provide or to govern. Siguro yung hindi na nakita siguro ng iba, yung sacrifices din, pero apparently, so kung yun na nakikita mo, sir, so we respect your observation also. At least we live at that siguro, sir, no? Maybe by the coming administration, maybe that could be improved, no, by the new Deputy Secretary in the future. So, good luck na lang siguro sa atin sa lahat, sir. No? I understand your sentiments siguro on that aspect, sir. We respect that, sir. We respect that.
Okay, salamat din po, Sir Attorney.
Yes, sir. No problem po. Yes, sir.
Thank you po. Thank you,
Thank you, Sir Richard. Thank you, Attorney Mayorita. So here's another question, Attorney, from the chat box. So, if M1 can introduce himself or herself, Attorney, may questions. Kapag donated pa, kailangan pa ba i-report as a supply officer?
Yes, maybe I believe the one asking this is the one handling the record siguro, or a supply officer. We consider that as a property, no, donated to the government. So the ownership now transfers to the entity, no, given that property or belongings. So if it is an accountable property, that should be recorded in our supply, no, as an added property in our organization. That is why in our case, no, we receive majority of some of our properties are donated from different government agencies. So they provided inventory to that, And also on our schedule, no, of books of accounts, we also declare them as donated property for accountability purposes. So even if it is a donated property, you could not take that for personal use also. It now falls as a government or belonging to government property for government use also. So thank you for that question, ma'am. No, from Imwan.
Thank you, everyone. Hindi ko sure kung ako mag-address attorney kung he or she ba? Attorney, so classmates, do we have extra or additional questions for Attorney Mayor Muda? So I guess if wala naman kanilay questions for Attorney, pero if the time arises na naatay question, pwede na ba Attorney na among i-compile ng umang pangutana, dayon ang among isend sa imua, pinaagi ni Attorney Estrella.
Yes, ma'am, no problem po. I will welcome them, ma'am. I will welcome them. We recognize them, ma'am. Pwede kayo, ma'am. Pwede kayo, no? No problem. Eh, basta kang uban, na-busy na siguro pang luto ron, ma'am, or nanugok na siguro tanan ng mga kauban na to karon.
Okay, attorneys. Attorney, thank you so much for this.
I understand, ma'am. Okay, no problem po, ma'am.
Thank you.
We will wait for that. If there are other questions not provided under this platform.
Yeah, attorney. So thank you, Attorney Mayor Terry and Mayor
Welcome po
Anita.
sa lahat for all your listening. Thank you for my invite also to be part of your online seminar for your first government management seminar on this forum. Thank you po sa lahat.
Thank you, Attorney. So it was a very informative session, especially pinakaunang session na to karong bandaga is the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees or Republic Act 6173. So my takeaway for this is katujung ko Angela Attorney. Ang takeaway na ko is the norms of conduct. So it became RA 6173 is like the Bible of all.
Ramble, ma'am, 6713, ma'am.
Ay, sorry. 6713, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, noted.
Sorry, attorney. Kapasay mo ako.
Okay. Relax lang. Ito, ma'am. No problem, ma'am. Noted.
So, ako takeaway attorney and for the rest of my classmates, like this Republic Act is somewhat our Bible for all officials and public employees, especially kanabit ang ginabutan there is the norms of conduct.
Yes.
From 1 to 8, like 1 is commitment to public interest, 2 is professionalism, 3 is justness and sincerity, 4 is political neutrality, 5 is responsiveness to the public. Pinakalisod siguro dagway aning number 8 for all is ang number 8.
Simple pero dili gyud sayo ng mga lista yun.
Dili gyud sayo, sir, because we are as everyone will say that we are in the eyes of the public. So as role models, especially holding this positions that we have, is we have to put it with dignity and integrity sad. So I think wala naman siguro attorney.
Napinapahabol si Ma'am Cerise.
Oh, sorry. Nadala sa kuan. So, attorney, I have an inquiry. Is there a need for a head to act on verbal feedback on falsification of documents? There is no written complaint yet, but there is already concerns from the employee.
Okay, ma'am, no. So we have to clarify these things because we only act on administrative complaint based on a written subscribed complaint. So if there is only a verbal manifestation of that complaint, that would not be properly acted upon by the head of agency. So the one who raised that issue should have put that into writing for the agency to properly act on that kind of request or verbal request, for falsification of particular documents. But we encourage somebody, if that entails yung falsification of public documents, you may write the head of the agency by animosity or by anonymous writer, provided you secure the head of the agency the documents, and the head of the agency has to act on this complaint. even if one is not a non-writer, no? Not a subscribed one. Kaya yun naman nakaprovide sa rules natin. So anonymous complaint can be acted upon if provided with supporting evidence. Okay, ma'am. May isa pa rin mo sa baba, ma'am, kay Sir Marvin.
Thank you, Attorney. So thank you, Ma'am Teresa Habagat, for your question. I hope nga nakuha po niyo mo itong answer ni Attorney, and I hope it will also help you out. And we have from Sir Marvin Ricamara. Attorney, good day. Attorney, considered ba as conflict of interest if husband is private contractor and wife is public teacher? Husband
As a government employee, if it would have a tendency, no, or may similarity dun sa nature ng business ng husband mo as a contractor, meaning you have that capacity to approve request or part ka sa bidding, for example, yung sa Bids and Awards Committee, like example, no, na to grant this award in the construction of whatever improvement in the agency, in the DepEd. So yun ang may conflict, ma'am. Pero outside of that engagement, I would not see any conflict of interest. Doon lang siguro papasok yung conflict, yun na, yung participation ng husband mo, and your participation also is material or crucial in the approval of that engagement of your husband. So kung wala kang participation, ma'am, if you're only a classroom teacher, then no conflict to that matter. So kung purely lang yun, ma'am, no, as a classroom teacher, wala kang participation sa procurement, sa supply, delivery of supplies, for example, in relation to the function of your husband as a private contractor, then I could not see any conflict of interest. I hope I have answered that. Si Sir Marvin para, no, Sir Marvin. Okay po.
Thank you, Attorney Mayor Mita. So I guess wala na siya ipangutang atong mga classmates kaya mga higala. Ang siguro nagtantad na rin sila o karne.
Luto na, ma'am. Alas 11 na, ma'am. 11:30.
Basta nahurot na, Attorney. So request po sa atong mga ka-open to please open their cameras for our photo ops with Attorney Jerry Mayor Mita.
Yes. Yung iba, busy pa. Oh, traveling pa yung iba. Halata masyado. Hindi na lang. Okay.
Okay, naka-on na ba ang tanan?
Sa kampang wala. Hapay-hapay kamay.
Hello, wait. Nag-loading ako ang...
Sharing lang, sharing.
Gallery. Sige. Ako na rin alam. Wait, ako na rin. Kinali siya. 1, 2, 3. Wait, ako ba? Ano lang? Sige, go. Ako mag-screenshot. 1, 2, 3, smile. Next page. Direct smile lang, sir. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Next page. Ay, sa segunda kong smile lang, sir. Kaya ilahin ng page. 1, 2, 3, smile. Next page.
Permission to leave in
1 o'clock. So I guess as sa house rules, as mentioned by Miss Melanie ganina, to be on time and on the room na ta. By 1 o'clock or preferably 15 minutes before. Nabalik na akong camera.
Sige. Thank you, Ma'am Melanie, Ma'am Mandel, Attorney Evelia, Sir Enting. So, thank you sa lahat. Thank you. Permission to leave.
Mag-music na ta.